let's get this ready. Okay, so I've been promising this video for a while. In this video, I'll be responding to a slew of comments I've gotten in my previous videos. Since this is the first time I'm doing this, it's gonna be a little experimental. But before we get into the comments, I want to give some channel updates. So this video is actually celebrating 1,000 subscribers, which we passed about 2 months ago. But there were honestly more time-pressing videos I was trying to get out as they were sensitive to certain movements that were going on in New York. If you haven't watched those videos on McGinnis or Fordham Road, I definitely recommend it. I'll leave a link in the description down below. The next goal I'd like to reach is 5,000 subscribers. And I think once we do that, I'll do another one of these Q&A videos, as well as set up a Patreon for early and exclusive content. Finally, before we get into the comments, let's briefly talk about the direction of the channel. So when I first started this channel, I intended to use it as a means to show off what it's like to live in Los Angeles without a car. And a lot of my early videos are about exploring Los Angeles without a vehicle. The difference between living in Los Angeles with a car and without a car are insanely jarring. Not only do you realize how poor LA's public transit is, but you also realize how neglected large swaths of Los Angeles are. Anyways, I can do a whole separate video on my thoughts on Los Angeles and what it's like to live in Los Angeles without a car. But initially I did make this channel to get some self-validation about living in Los Angeles without a car. I had to know if I was really the only person that felt this way about LA's public. And honestly, YouTube showed up. My commute video exploded, and I honestly got a lot of sweet comments that validated the way I felt. Even a few notable YouTubers left comments on that video, which I'll respond to later in this episode. So first off, I honestly want to thank everyone for helping me get through that. Since LA, I've moved to the East Coast, as returning viewers and subscribers may already know. By the way, if you're not a subscriber, I recommend subscribing for more sick urbanist content. Also, feel free to follow me on Instagram or Threads for more channel updates. Anyways, returning viewers and subscribers may have noticed that since I've moved to the East Coast, my content has been less about, oh, let's walk around this area, and more documentative and journalistic. And I do enjoy making both of these walking videos and these documentary videos. So in the future, expect a little bit of both. Okay, let's actually get to the comments now. For each comment, I'm gonna give a little bit of context about the video it's from, but I'll also leave a link up in the corner for anyone who wants to watch the video. Most of the comments in this video are gonna be on the more constructive side, but there will also be a few mean, toxic ones towards the end, so stick around to see those. Let's start with some comments I got on my LA commute video. Our first comment is from none other than Alan Fisher, who has an excellent urbanist YouTube channel, which I recommend checking out. I'll leave a link down below. Alan says, "That highway median transfer station always baffled me. Strange how there's no walls blocking out the highway noise." Alan is totally right, and the lack of walls at that station is totally bizarre. Outside of just the hearing damage from that station, I actually do worry about what kind of permanent respiratory damage is done by using that station. Just due to low frequency, you're standing for about 15 minutes, breathing in particulate matter from cars. I do wonder what permanent damage it's done to my lungs, but even more so for people who live in Los Angeles and have been taking this commute for years, if not decades. I'd be curious to see what health impacts a highway station has on someone. This video also saw a lot of comments like this one from London 2806. "I won't complain about my New York City commute ever again." Or this one from Fievo. "Watching from the European Union, it makes me appreciate my public infrastructure and city design." Like, I get Europeans not understanding how good they have it because they're like 10,000 miles away. But as a New Yorker who has spent most of his life in New York and has also traveled around a lot of the United States, New Yorkers so take for granted how good they have it in New York. Compared to the rest of the country, New York's public transit system is leagues ahead. Leagues. Traveling in a lot of parts of the United States, it's honestly sometimes hard to believe that we live in one of the wealthiest nations in the world. But in New York City, I have much less of a doubt. We have some of the best public services, public investments, public parks. The city constantly feels like it's growing and there's construction and there's new things coming up. Yet I constantly hear New Yorkers complain about the subway or driving in New York or the buses or the bike lanes or the mopeds. Honestly, compared to a lot of the US, it's so much better. Okay, one more for my commute video, and this one is from Travels of Munch 1476. "Lol, I didn't expect him to work at SpaceX." To which the Hungry Penguin 69 replied, "Isn't it sad that we are surprised when someone who has a good job chooses to / enjoys the use of public transit?" Yeah, this one is a real bummer. So I did used to work at SpaceX as an engineer, and in that video I was going to my office. And don't get me wrong, as an engineer I made decent money and I could have easily afforded a car if I wanted to. Honestly, I can make a whole separate video as to why I chose not to do that, but I'll gauge from the comments if there's any interest in that. But more to Hungry Penguin's point, I do think it's disappointing that people in LA don't take public transit more, and that there is such a negative perception of public transit in LA. My commute was actually about the same amount of time as many of my coworkers. The difference was that I didn't have to stand in traffic and could actually do other things while I was on my commute. But whenever I told people, including my coworkers, that I took public transit, I always got the same response. People would express concern for my safety. Is it safe to use public transit? Which is bizarre. There were even times when I used my laptop on LA public transit. I'll keep my answer short. There were certainly times on LA public transit where I felt uncomfortable, but never where I felt in danger, and those are two very different feelings. I've seen a lot of weird stuff on LA public transit, but as regards to safety, during my time taking LA public transit, never had I seen an unsafe behavior. However, when I used to drive in LA, at least once or twice a week, I would see a car accident with an ambulance nearby. Alright, next comment. I did several videos about Koreatown, Los Angeles, so here are some comments from those. Marius Factor 3597 said, Olympic Boulevard is treacherous. They need to slow it down to 25 miles per hour. They need to replace a car lane with a bike lane and add a bus lane by removing street parking. They have way too much street parking in K-Town. There is the Purple Line, decent bus service, and it's walkable. I actually really like this comment because it leaves a criticism and then it actually provides a solution, which is one step farther than most people get in their life. But I do agree for the most part, Olympic Boulevard could use a road diet or at least a dedicated bus lane, which would incentivize more people to use the buses and would probably increase their frequency. I don't know if I agree with adding a bike lane to an arterial boulevard without serious road dieting. I think a truly successful bike lane is the one that has as few intersections with a car lane as possible. I don't know if this obsession of making bikes go everywhere that cars go and cars go everywhere that bikes go really makes too much sense. I think there are some roads that we should really start just completely removing cars from, and I think there are other roads where we should completely remove bikes from. I think these hybrid solutions might be more dangerous or at least more inconvenient than we realize. Not Just Bikes has a pretty good video about how bike routes in the Netherlands tend to avoid any intersection with cars. Other than that, I agree with Marius. The next comment comes from Nimesh in Los Angeles, who actually has a really good urban planning channel that specifically focuses on Los Angeles. I'll leave a link to it down below. Nimesh says, Koreatown definitely has the most potential out of anywhere in LA. Its location right smack in the middle of LA is its most important trait, in my opinion. I've emphasized this in my previous episodes. Koreatown is such an underrated part of Los Angeles. It's a perfect central place between downtown and Santa Monica. It's a place that actually welcomes development and local investment, unlike other local municipalities. Like Beverly Hills is just a NIMBY lost cause at this point. There's already so many good restaurants and businesses in the areas, and I think the locals are already putting so much effort into making Koreatown a prosperous area. It's kind of a damn shame that the city can't recognize a golden opportunity when it's handed to it on a silver platter. If I were the city of LA, I would really start to funnel public investment into Koreatown, start to pedestrianize more areas, start to road diet more areas, and start to add more bike accessibility to the area. I mainly say this because Koreatown really reminds me of Flushing Main Street about 10 years ago. If you look at Flushing, New York about 10 years ago, it was really not the downtown area that it is today. It was much more modest, a lot of old mom and pop shops. But now Flushing is this like booming area that has a dedicated busway. It has a brand new mall that just opened up that's doing really well. There's a ton of city construction that demonstrates further long-term investment from the government into the area. I just think Koreatown could have as much of a success story as Flushing. Okay, next comment comes from Sebastian. Koreatown may be a jumbled mess architecturally, but I enjoy the fact that it looks like Epcot Center on shuffle. I'm less fond of the Strode vibe on Olympic Boulevard. It gives me Queens Boulevard vibes. Yeah, I have mixed feelings about the architecture in Koreatown. For one, it's cool that it's creative, but for another, a lot of it kind of seems cheap and inauthentic. I get the sense that a bunch of developers decide to get really creative without having any consideration for the local architecture of the area. As for Olympic Boulevard feeling like Queens Boulevard, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually feel safer on Olympic. Next comment comes from Mr. Vulcan 1997. Wilshire, not Wilshire. Versailles, not Versailles. Man, I get this one a lot. I'm a first-generation American, which I think drives a lot of my literal pronunciation of words. Although Versailles is a French word, so that excuse might be a little bullshit. But I read these and I try to improve, so bear with me. Just wait till I do a video on Worcester, Massachusetts or Greenwich Village, Manhattan. Next comment we got from GeoKyle6646, who says, I love your walking videos. I'm planning to move to LA and live car free soon. These are relaxing to watch while I recover from wisdom teeth surgery. Happy face. Thanks for the compliments. I always appreciate them. And I wish you the best of luck of living in LA car free, but I'll just say that this is something that I've acknowledged I was crazy for doing, and I really wouldn't recommend other people to try to live in Los Angeles without a car. I really hope that's just the pain medication talking at your end. Okay, the next 3 comments are from my paranoid architecture video. This video is about how I find a lot of the defensive measures that people take in Koreatown to be a little over the top. I Love Met said, I think the issue with fencing is while it may or may not be arbitrary, perhaps for certain areas with lax laws like California, squatters can gain access to homes, perhaps residents on vacation, and squat there for a while until an eviction process can be fulfilled. There is actually some truth to this, and I experienced it firsthand in Los Angeles. During the pandemic, a building on my block became completely abandoned and quickly became the home of squatters. This eventually resulted in the police coming and kicking everyone out. All that being said, squatting is still fairly uncommon and it shouldn't be driving housing policy or architectural decisions. Next comment from Jack Johnson 210 says, your statements on crime are silly and naive. In this case, my statements in question were about how I find people tend to overreact on small incidents of crime. Not to say that there aren't cities that are struggling with crime, but oftentimes it's actually the wrong cities getting attention for crime. But we should also remember that for the most part, crime is an externality and not a feature. Most people try to solve crime by attacking crime. You can't really attack crime, you can mostly mitigate it. You really need to find what the source of the problem is, which in most American cities is insanely expensive housing and wages that don't make any sense. I know this is an insane thought, but most people don't want to be criminals. Most people want to have a significant other and have kids or a family. If given the option, people don't want to commit crime. Following on this crime trend, we have Lexa Power saying, your comment about the outliers and people putting up hostile fences based on something that's so rare reminded me of America as a whole. Don't we all take our shoes off at the airport because of one event that only involved a handful of people like 20 years ago that never happened again? I don't understand why everyone in this country is so obsessed with these hostile reactions to isolated incidents. It's really frustrating. If only people cared about statistics, probability, or reality. So while I do think Lexa Power is right, I am one of those paranoid individuals who lived through that event 20 years ago. And yeah, I'm still a little nervous to get on a plane, even though I know I shouldn't be. But what Lexa is saying is what I was trying to drive home on. I think most people just completely misread or misrepresent crime data. And even when crime data refutes their points, they just move the argumentative goalpost by saying something like, crime data doesn't account for unreported crime. Sure, and speeding cameras don't ticket unregistered vehicles. That doesn't change the fact that a good chunk of crime does get reported, and we can make decisions and conclusions based on that information and previously recorded information. As a slight tangent on this topic, I have about 2 or 3 episodes in the pipeline about crime, but I totally hate making videos about crime. Crime in America has become such a polarized topic that all nuance in the discussion has just disappeared. You have one side that is essentially terrified of leaving their house or their car and believes that cities are these crime-ridden war zones, yet at the same time they don't want to enact any police reform that could actually make their tax dollars more efficiently used. And you have the other side that is so angry at the police force, and arguably rightfully so, that they have no faith that the situation can be improved without a complete restructuring. We really need to bring back nuance and realism when talking about crime. Okay, enough of that. Let's get to the next one. Coco Guy 2 left the following comment on my Bayside video. Bayside is basically impossible to get to without the Long Island Railroad. I know there are buses, but you gotta be real. I'm gonna have to respectfully disagree here. I think Bayside actually has a really dense and good bus network. From Bayside, you can easily get to Flushing, Jamaica, Bay Terrace, Whitestone, College Point, all through buses or a bus and a transfer. And the Long Island Railroad definitely helps you get into the city faster. On that note, I think NYC buses are actually incredibly underrated. The buses themselves are fantastic, and I plan to do an entire episode about them. Okay, next question from Sport2175. Can you do a video for San Diego someday? I heard their mass transit is a few notches above typical North American cities. I actually did do a weekend trip to San Diego about a year ago, and I really enjoyed it. The downtown in San Diego is surprisingly really walkable, and because of that, I actually didn't really explore the transit system at all. But I wouldn't mind doing an episode on it in the future. I would like to explore their light rail line a bit more. This one is from kid named Finger47 in my La Sombrita video. Great video. I especially like the point about how LA won't be able to get anything substantial done without more centralized form of governance. This is another one of those things that I don't think people truly understand about Los Angeles until they take public transit for a year. The city is still very clearly decentralized. It's blatantly obvious that there are more wealthy communities that have more political influence than others. And yeah, I agree. For the most part, there needs to be more centralization. And city engineers and transportation engineers really need a way to sidestep these local municipalities. Okay, last comment from my constructive set, and this one comes from Tommy Peacock 1117 from my McGinnis episode. As someone who commutes by bike on a daily basis, I feel it's important to point out an emerging issue that isn't being talked about. Yes, older studies prove that bike lanes can make roads safer. However, the growing presence of e-bikes and motorized scooters, both capable of traveling at high speeds, in recent years has brought about a radical transformation to what was once a calm, protected bike lane. Unfortunately, this transformation has resulted in the city's bike lanes becoming increasingly hazardous for both bicyclists and pedestrians. Considering this, I'm genuinely concerned that adding bike lanes to McGinnis Boulevard may invite further chaos. There's a lot to unpack in this comment. First, let's talk about the issue of e-bikes and mopeds. I am aware that there have been a lot of issues in NYC regarding mopeds. A few about e-bikes, but the majority of articles I see seem to be more moped related. The main issue is that mopeds are taking advantage of bike lanes, and I find that they're often not following the rules of the bike lanes. They're hitting fast speeds, they're oftentimes swerving onto the sidewalk. It is honestly a mess. And I do agree, I don't think it's right. The bike lane infrastructure is simply not made for mopeds. But I don't think it's fair to lump e-bikes with mopeds, primarily for a lot of technical differences between the two, and I can explore that in a future episode if people are interested. Secondly, and I see this happen all the time in these discussions, is I feel like people are conflating two problems here. One is that of mopeds, and the other is that of bike lanes on arterial boulevards. If your concern is mopeds misusing bike lanes, then we should be attacking that problem. And I don't think that this totally separate issue should actually be stopping the development of bike lanes. If you're concerned about bike lanes on an arterial boulevard not being controlled or safe enough, then we should be solving that problem. I think we've already demonstrated how to make good bike lanes that separate cars from bikes. And it's not with these plastic billards, it's with jersey barriers and concrete blocks. If you want better control of the mopeds, then you're going to have to create specialized security groups that monitor traffic along these bike lanes and along the roads in general. And New York City has been working on this. There has been an effort to ticket mopeds that are riding in the bike lanes. There has been an effort to clean up the streets of unregistered mopeds. And the NYPD is actually setting up a bike lane police group. They've been seen riding around Times Square. But what I see happen way too often in these discussions is that we lump all the negative things that could happen with a bike lane, that we get discouraged with building a bike lane at all. And I think that's the problem I have with this comment, is again, focus on individual problems to solve. All right, if you've lasted this long, I assume you either want to see the toxic comments, enjoy listening to what I have to say, or I make really good background filler noise. But before I get into the last few comments, this is just a reminder to hit that like button if you've been enjoying this so far, and to subscribe to tag along for future episodes. Also, one more thing, I have added the super thanks button down below. If you have a question that you'd like me to answer in a future episode, feel free to use that button, and I'll try to include it in the next episode if it seems appropriate. Okay, let's get back to the comments. These two comments are from my LA commute video, and I'm gonna read them back to back because they kind of have the same topic or tone. Chicago Carlos says, "Are you kidding me with this foolishness? There are dozens of L stations and highway mediums here in Chicago that sound exactly like that. You will live." And Vision GC4HY says, "You sound kind of whiny. You can handle it. I use the Silver Line sometimes. When I was growing up, they called it the Freeway Flyer. Most of the time in my life, there was no trains in LA. At least you have them now." Both of these comments have that "I used to walk uphill both ways to school" kind of vibe. I get this is supposed to show how tough and rough and how bad you had it back in the day. But honestly, in 2023, this is such a submissive attitude. All I see when people talk like this is that they're willing to have the government walk all over their back on something as basic as public infrastructure. You're not demonstrating to me how good you are at dealing with discomfort. I can walk uphill both ways also. All you're demonstrating to me is about how complacent you are about your local government misusing your tax dollars. Alright, the next comment is from a short I posted, and if you ever want to see some true insanity, just look at the comments on any urbanist short, reel, or TikTok. This one was specifically from a short I did about trucks ruining neighborhoods. Ex-Democrat says, "You're clearly jealous because they bought a nice vehicle while you're stuck walking like a chump." Man, all I gotta say to that is imagine hitting adulthood and still being jealous about someone's Tonka truck. All right, thanks again, everyone, for the great comments, questions, love, and support. Thanks also to all the negative comments for paying tribute to the almighty algorithm. Your comments are not in vain. I appreciate the engagement metrics. If you have a follow-up question or I didn't get to your question, leave it down below. I'll definitely take a look at this video when we hit our 5K subscriber mark, assuming we get there. All right, thanks for watching. See y'all next time, and keep on walking.